Welcome to Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom. My guest today is Brian Hicks, the co-author of Profit from the Peak, The End of Oil and the Greatest Investment Event of the Century. This offers a sobering assessment of where we are energy-wise and what steps need to be taken for the American way of life to continue. Brian, in your book, it states that there's no doubt that oil has peaked and that fossil fuels will soon peak, and we Americans have experienced the $4 a gallon gas, and in some instances almost $5 a gallon. Of course, in the recent past, in the recent few weeks, we've had some relief. But if you had to predict, would you bet that the price of oil will be higher or lower in 10 years from today?
I'm going to say that the price of oil is going to be higher 10 years from now, and for the simple reason that demand continues to go up.
Okay.
And the IEA, which is sort of the watch group for global oil production and consumption, that's the International Energy Agency out of France, they're predicting that by 2015, oil consumption will go from today's 86 million barrels of oil per day to 103 million barrels per day. That's a net gain in consumption of what, about 16 million barrels.
So you're talking 103 million barrels?
103 million barrels
a day?
Per day, right.
Wow. That's a lot.
Currently we consume 86.
Okay.
Now to put that in perspective, that's a net gain in consumption of 16 million barrels.
Right.
So we have to go out and find an extra 16 million barrels per day to meet rising demand. That's the equivalent of 2 Saudi Arabias.
Oh, wow.
So.
Well, then, so in this case, we really have to start drilling. I mean, everyone's caught, there's a lot going on in Capitol Hill regarding this drilling situation. I mean, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, basically said she would not allow drilling to take place in the United States because she wanted to save the planet. But what about the other countries around the world? They're not worried about saving the planet, and everyone's drilling, right? I mean, and of course, she did say she was going to maybe loosen up here, and there would be some drilling, a vote on the drilling question. What do you think about that?
Well, I think we're at a tipping point. We have to balance the environmental factors with the ability to actually afford energy. And there's no free lunch. Either we drill domestically and try to soften this price that we're experiencing, or we get used to $10 for a gallon of gasoline. In Europe, that's they've been paying that for years. They've been paying anywhere from $7 a gallon on up.
Right.
That's our future if we do not allow companies to drill.
But basically, what's happened is over the last 50 years, we've had oil that's been easy to extract from the ground, right? Now it's going to take more effort and go deeper. I mean, the drilling is much tougher now, right? More expensive.
Yes, it's more expensive. Most geologists, petrogeologists, will agree that in terms of recoverable oil, there's 2 types of oil. There's oil in place, that's in the ground, okay? And then there's another type of oil, which is what is recoverable from that oil in place.
Okay.
Most geologists agree that we had anywhere from 2 trillion to 2.5 trillion barrels of recoverable oil. The first oil well was drilled back in 1857. Since 1857 through today, okay,
how many trillions?
We have consumed over 1 trillion barrels of oil. In fact, we consumed our 1 trillionth barrel back in December of 2005.
Wow.
Okay, so now we're eating into that other half of those 2 trillions. The first half was easy. You stuck a drill bit into the ground and it gushed out.
Right.
The flow rate was immense.
Fast.
Yeah, and fast. Today, though, we have to drill deeper. We have to employ methods like water flooding and injections to get this oil out of the ground. And that's costing us more money, and it's costing us more energy to get out of the ground.
Well, what about the fact is that there are other alternatives to oil? I mean, don't you think that we've focused all of our eggs in one basket? I mean, what about nuclear power? I mean, why haven't we? I mean, apparently the Europeans have embraced more nuclear power question more than we have.
Yeah, we're the only country that hasn't embraced fully nuclear energy, at least not for the past few decades.
Right.
Currently, we have about 103 nuclear power plants in operation.
I think your book said it was 112.
Well, it might be 112.
And that were built between 1957 and 1990, right?
Right.
But then what happened after 1990? Nothing's been done, right?
There's been a moratorium.
Moratorium on it, okay.
And whenever there is a proposal for a nuclear power plant to be built, the NIMBY factor kicks in. Nobody wants a nuclear power plant
in their
backyard. And not just that, but the regulatory obstacles these companies have to and governments have to go over to build these. It's a 10-year period.
What is the problem of storing the waste? I mean, nuclear power seems to be very efficient, but then you've got the waste factor, and then and then we have the Yucca Mountain.
Exactly right. Yeah, nobody wants to deal with the after effect of nuclear energy. But while we sort of go through this process of whether or not we want nuclear energy, the world does want nuclear energy.
Well, then in that case, what about mining the uranium? Isn't uranium, enriched uranium is what you need to mine to, then we could be supplying other countries with the uranium and maybe using that cash to buy oil or drill. I mean, what do you think? I mean, do we how is our uranium reserves? What's looking?
Well, we're very abundant in terms of uranium reserves.
Oh, good.
In fact, the world is very well supplied with uranium. Recently, though, we've undergone a uranium bull market where the price of uranium went from $7 all the way up to, I think, $130 last year. There's been a pullback.
I think it's down to like $65 or $70.
$70.
Yeah.
But that price rise reflects the build-out that the world is experiencing in terms of nuclear power plants.
I think China is building like 100 nuclear power
Right,
plants.
China. Well, there's 900 nuclear power plants scheduled to be built in the next 43 years.
900?
900.
Wow.
The bulk of those are going to be coming from China and India.
Okay, so we're way behind the 8 ball there, aren't
Well,
we?
we're way behind the 8 ball, but like we said, we have 112 power plants currently in use in the United States. China only has 10.
Okay.
So they're playing catch up to us and everybody else.
Okay, so do you think that we have to modernize the current plants that we have? I mean, are those plants, are they going to be safe? Is it operational? Is it workable to keep those plants going?
Absolutely. I mean, technology is increasing every year. So
cool. Okay. Well, what about this? What about drilling, offshore and onshore drilling? I mean, the environmentalists are very concerned about the effect on the environment. What do you think about that? I mean, can we have safeguards with the drilling and go forward here with that?
Sure. Again, it's a balancing act. I mean, drilling offshore, drilling domestically, there is going to be some environmental degradation. I mean, there always is.
Okay.
But we have to weigh that, against our economy. And whether or not we can supply our economy with cheap energy.
Right.
Everybody says money is what makes the world go around. It's not. It's cheap energy. Cheap energy allows us to do basically everything.
Exactly.
And I think we're going to, in the next few years, we're experiencing a domestic oil production boom now.
Are we?
You're seeing wildcatters and independents going everywhere.
I know that they're going to North Dakota.
North Dakota, Montana, and
Is that like a new oil field up there?
It's not a new oil field. It's called the Bakken Basin. It's been known for since the 1950s. However, there's been 2 problems drilling there. One was the price of oil.
Okay.
The price of oil was just so low that it wasn't economical for companies to go up there to drill. The other factor was technology.
Okay.
It's a very you have to drill very deep, and you have to do something called horizontal drilling. You drill down and then you make a turn.
Go across.
Then you go across, and then by doing that, now that the technology has come to speed, these companies now can go there and get more oil out of the ground. It's still not a panacea. It's we're talking about a trickle coming out of the ground, but it will help.
Well, what do you mean? How many barrels do you think?
Well, most barrels that are being drilled now are producing anywhere from 1,000 barrels to 2,000 barrels per day.
But given the millions that we need, it's just like it's just nothing really. It's just a drop in the bucket, huh?
Given the millions that we need, just to give you for instance, the U.S. consumes 21 million barrels of oil per day. 7 million of that 21 comes from our own domestic wells. So we have to find another 14. If we want to become energy, independent, we have to find 14 million barrels per day domestically to get free of Mideast oil.
So right now we are basically importing what, 2/3?
About 2/3.
Thirds of our oil is coming from overseas, from the Middle East.
Coming from overseas and coming from Canada. Canada is actually our number one oil supplier.
What about Venezuela? Didn't they weren't they supplying oil for a while? And
yes, they were. Venezuela was another big supplier to the U.S. However, just like the U.S. experienced peak oil back in the 1970s, where our production peaked out.
Right.
Venezuela is now experiencing the same thing.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And there are accounts where Venezuela actually had to go out into the open market and buy oil to fulfill contracts that they had.
Wow. And what about Mexico?
Mexico's in the same predicament.
Same predicament? Wow.
Same predicament. Their giant oil field, it's called Cantarell. It's one of the 4 supergiants.
Okay.
Is now in catastrophic decline, and
Whoa.
they don't hide the fact. They're publicly announcing that their giant oil field is now in terminal decline. And
what are they going to do, you think?
Well, they're either going to look for more oil somewhere else, or they're going to profit as much as they can off the oil that they have remaining.
So all these countries around the world are scrambling. All of them are scrambling for the oil, right?
They're all scrambling for their oil, and they're all trying to employ methods to keep their well life as long as possible.
Whoa. Well, let's look at some alternatives. What about, you read in the news about the electric cars. How quickly and how cheaply can we switch to electric cars? I mean, do you think that's an option for us?
I think we have to. We are going through an energy transition right now. The U.S. and the world is going through an epic transition. We've gone through 2 before. We've gone from wood to coal, coal to oil, and now we're going from oil to something else.
And how long? How much time do we have to make this? This transition, because this could really economically ruin us.
It could ruin us. It all depends on if we really are, if we've already reached peak oil, and we're now going over that second half of the slope.
Right.
Things could get really pretty chaotic around here. Hopefully, we can buy ourselves some time with some domestic production. But in the meantime,
we need to madly scramble to get other things off the ground, right?
Yeah. In the meantime, you're seeing the market respond to the crisis that we have, and you're seeing like the Toyota Prius. I think the Prius, which is a hybrid car,
right,
I think is 50 years from now, you're going to look back and see that was a bridge from the oil car to the electric car.
Okay.
So you're seeing companies develop electric cars. Some very fascinating things are coming out of Japan. The one thing about an electric car, the one technological issue that we have to overcome is battery and storage.
Storing the energy, right?
Storing the energy. You don't want to be driving, taking a road trip in an electric car that
all of a sudden the
45,
battery.
It's only 45 miles. So we have to find, we have to develop batteries that can last, 400, 500 miles in one
that
drive.
Needs to be developed, right? Well, now you've got a chapter here. You've covered a lot of different areas. Endless energy. Here comes the sun. Solar. That was really big in the 70s. I remember President Carter was offering all kinds of special deals with the federal government trying to get people to encourage to put solar panels on their house. What do you think? Is that going to happen again? Or are we going to see a big, huge effort?
Well, it's already happening.
Okay.
If you go to, and particularly in California, you're seeing a lot of solar installation companies pop up.
Okay.
And they're now installing solar panels. And the solar panels that are now being developed and sold are more pleasing to the eye, and they're more integrated
and more efficient.
More efficient and more integrated and cheaper.
So a business could put up some solar panels on their office or something, and then they could save money on their bill, right?
Absolutely. Walmart's doing it.
Okay.
FedEx is doing it. Some of the big retailers that have big roof space are now beginning to install solar panels to offset their energy costs.
So do you have any favorite solar manufacturing companies you'd like to?
I do.
All right.
Applied Materials, which is a semiconductor company, but a couple of years ago they acquired a solar company that was building what's known as thin film.
Okay.
Okay. Thin film. It's basically like a sheet of a film
that
you can just overlay on your on a roof. Thin film is
easy to install then.
easy to install. It's cheaper to install, and I think more and smaller, less invasive solar systems are the wave of the future.
Okay.
There are also companies out there that are not public yet, but they're doing some very fascinating things with nanotechnology. Nanotechnology.
That's that real small.
Real small.
Yeah.
In 10 years, 15 years from now, you'll see, you'll go to your Home Depot and you'll be able to buy roof shingles that already have solar cells already integrated in the actual roof shingle.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
And that's the name of that company is developing that?
It's basically in the lab still.
Okay. Well, then you feel like it's still right now solar is about what 2% of the energy supply, and
Yes.
this. Okay. What about wind?
Wind. That's sort of the flavor of the month right now. Wind.
Okay.
And then you have to give a lot of credit to T. Boone Pickens for
Yes, that's
for
right. He's
bringing,
been on the television a lot.
right
Promoting wind.
I think wind is good. I mean, I think wind is a very viable.
Of course, California's got the most windmills, right?
Yes, I was in California in January, and I visited the two largest wind farms in California in the U.S.
Well, don't you think they're kind of ugly?
Yeah, I do actually. I wouldn't want them in my backyard, but. I visited two wind farms. One had 4,000 turbines, and the other one had 6,000 turbines.
So how many? What does that equivalent in terms of barrels of oil? I mean, how much energy is there?
I don't know. I can't quantify it that way, but I just know that the 4,000 wind turbine farm supplied the nearby city, which I think was Bakersfield.
Okay.
Supplied their energy, about 20% of their energy needs, but the real estate that you need for these wind farms is just immense.
Enormous, yeah.
It's enormous. So for me, I see this more as a Band-Aid, as a bridge solution to something else.
Well, I thought, your chapter 12 in your book was very interesting because you say what's needed is a Manhattan Project for energy.
Yes.
Or the Manhattan Project being when we developed the atomic bomb, right? And here you're saying we need to, and in fact, the International Energy Agency estimates the world will need to invest $16 trillion until 2030 just to keep up.
Yeah.
Well, what would how do you see that happening, a Manhattan Project?
Well, I see it as a multi-pronged effort.
Would it be government, private?
Private, yeah.
Working together, or just
more or less government getting out of the way and just allowing entrepreneurs. But I see it. I see it this way. I think we are going to develop the current oil and natural gas reserves that we have.
Okay.
Okay. Those oil and gas reserves are going to cost higher than today's price. While we're doing that to sort of buy ourselves some time, we are going to be developing alternative energies, wind, solar, geothermal.
All right, what's geothermal? Tell me about
Geothermal is tapping into the Earth's core heat.
Okay.
But
you can't do that in too many places, right?
Actually, you can do it pretty much anywhere.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's very big right now in Nevada, California,
I think out west,
Hawaii, Alaska.
Right.
And it's a very simple procedure. It's almost like drilling for oil. You just drill down until you reach a temperature of about 200 degrees, and then you just funnel that heat up into your power plant, and that power, cranks up the turbines and produces electricity.
Well, is it cheap? Is it cost effective?
It's cost effective. Once you the upfront cost of building the power plant is your major expense, but after that, it's basically free energy coming from the earth, and you just have to maintain it.
Right. Well, most of the American utility plants aren't they using nuclear versus? I mean, how many of them? There are very few. They're using geothermal, right?
Very few are using geothermal, but Nevada
is starting to.
Nevada is leading the way in terms of tapping into.
So I guess
into
others
geothermal.
are going to look and see how they do. And
and in fact, just last year, the Bureau of Land Management held an auction for all this Nevada land, and I'm told that it was like a land rush from all these utility companies buying up this land so they could secure geothermal rights.
Wow.
So I think in terms.
What companies would be involved?
Well, our favorite company in that space is a company called Ormat Technologies.
Ormat?
Ormat, yeah.
Ormat.
Trades on the New York Stock Exchange. ORA is the symbol. oldest geothermal company around.
Okay.
They've got properties in Nevada, California, Hawaii.
Okay.
And unlike many renewable energy companies, this company's profitable, making money, and expanding.
Good. That's good. Well, how about nuclear? What companies do you think are good in that area? Because I want to just cover both back and forth. I mean, jumping back to nuclear, but is that?
I like, in terms of the nuclear companies, I like the companies that are going to be constructing the nuclear power plants.
Oh, okay.
Companies like Exelon.
Exxon?
Exelon.
Exelon.
Yeah.
Exelon.
They're big in the nuclear space.
Okay.
I also like the uranium companies, the companies that are going to be mining the uranium source. Cameco is the top uranium company in the world. So I think those two companies are pretty good pure plays on nuclear.
Oh, nuclear. Okay. One of the things you mentioned in your book about there was a task force paper issued by the Council on Foreign Relations in 2006. And they talked about these energy myths that are, affect the American public. And one myth was that a lot of people think that the United States can't be energy independent. And others say, well, I mean, this Council on Foreign Relations said that it was a myth that the United States could be energy independent. Wonder why they said that. I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm not exactly sure why they said it. Maybe they were trying to dampen false hope, but they're absolutely right. The U.S. cannot be oil independent.
Really?
Like I said, we
are just too much. We have to have that oil, don't we?
Well, we have to have the oil. If our 70% of the oil barrel goes to transportation. So we have to replace, we literally have to build a completely new energy infrastructure to replace all the oil and natural gas infrastructure that we have.
What would that cost?
Estimates are anywhere from 11 trillion to 25 trillion.
Whoa.
So, to replace all the oil and natural gas infrastructure in the U.S. is a monumental task.
Okay.
But I think what's going to happen, you're seeing a gradual change. You're seeing, like we're seeing now, we're seeing wind, geothermal, solar being developed, and so this transition is going to unfold not over a couple years. It's going to unfold over a couple decades. Right.
Another myth that they mentioned on this Council on Foreign Relations was the fact that many people feel like the large Western oil companies like ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, Chevron control the price of oil.
No.
Now you get that from politicians too. They feel like, why do you think that people have that perception? Well,
when the general public, when they're angry, and when they go to fill up their car and it's costing them $50, $60, $70, they're gonna point to the greedy,
That's right.
American corporation.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that 93% of all oil reserves are controlled by governments and nationally controlled governments.
How many?
93%.
90%
Right.
are controlled by governments?
Yeah. I mean, just to compare it, Exxon's oil reserves are about 12 billion barrels, okay? Whereas Saudi Arabia's, and this is highly, subjected to speculation, but Saudi Arabia is speculated to have 260 billion barrels of reserves.
Wow.
Whereas Exxon has 12 billion. Big oil does not control the price of oil. The oil is a global commodity. It's traded, every day, and they are the price of oil is controlled by supply and demand.
Interesting. Well, do you think that Saudi Arabia will be able to? I mean, obviously they're going to have to sustain us for the next 30 years, right? I mean, do you think they will be able to do that?
It's questionable
because of the world demand, because of China, because of all the other countries, right?
Yeah, Matt Simmons, who is a former energy advisor to George Bush and Dick Cheney, he wrote a book in 2004 called Twilight in the Desert, the coming Saudi oil shock. And his book was a thesis. He studied all the data coming out of all the Saudi Arabian production from their oil fields.
Okay.
And he concluded that Saudi Arabia was either near or at peak.
Wow.
And his conclusion is that if Saudi Arabia is at peak oil, therefore the world is at peak oil. Because Saudi Arabia, next to Russia, is the largest oil producer And if Saudi Arabia goes into decline,
We're in trouble.
we're in trouble.
Wow. Well, what about Russia? Do they have enough oil to export to the world? I mean, what are about their reserves? Do we know?
We don't know exactly what their reserves are, but depending on the month, Saudi Arabia and Russia flip-flop in terms of number one producer.
Right.
But even they are beginning to see, I'm hearing accounts and seeing accounts that they're beginning to see declines in some of their major oil fields.
And then, of course, China doesn't have much oil, right?
China, well, no.
Not really to speak of, right?
No, not to speak of. I mean, they do have a lot of oil, but when you compare that to their just nonstop demand and consumption,
right.
They're going to need a lot more oil than they can produce themselves.
And shale oil is hard to extract, right?
Shale oil, in my opinion, is it's a non-starter.
Non-starter.
It's
wow.
a non-starter. This if we do go after shale oil this time, it'll be the 5th time that we've tried to get it.
Really?
Shale oil, it's not even oil. It's kerogen, which is a immature precursor to oil.
Wow.
So we have to actually refine it and turn it into a synthetic fuel. It's hard to get.
So it takes energy to get it, right?
It takes energy to get it. There's an equation out there that the oil industry uses. It's called energy return on energy invested. And how much energy does it take for you to get a barrel of oil out of the ground? Well, just to give you, for instance, on some of the Canadian oil sands, which is a huge operation, some of their projects, the ERO, or the energy return on energy invested, is 1.5 to 1. They're spending 1 barrel of oil to get 1.5 barrel out of the ground.
Wow. Well, Brian, it's really amazing the the fact that we have reached this point in history. And I've really been enjoying talking with you. I'm sure our viewers have really learned a lot from your discussion from your book, Profit from the Peak, and The End of Oil and the Greatest Investment Event of the Century. Thanks for being with us on Bookman's Corner, and we look forward to seeing everyone next month. Bye-bye.